Rachel from 7 and All, and today I am going to be doing a side-by-side comparison of Gentle and Classical Primer with Sonlight PreK. Why am I comparing these two? Well, because they are both very solid options for families who are looking for a literature-based curriculum that also incorporates Bible and Christian teaching for their early learners. For Gentle and Classical program, they recommend the primer to be used roughly at a kindergarten age level, while the Sonlight one is labeled pre-K. But I'm choosing to compare these levels because I believe, having used both of them, that they are the most analogous as far as terms of level and challenge. While I would say that Sequence 1 from Gentle and Classical and Kindergarten from Sonlight would be like the next level, the natural next level, although the labels may be a little bit different. We just got to look at realistically what is contained in them. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you today. I'll point out some of the differences so that you can decide which one might be a better fit for your family. I will start off by saying, and you know this if you've been watching this channel, that I am currently using both. We enjoy both, and maybe I'll get a little bit into the reasons as to why we're using both in this video, but that's probably not going to be the option most people would choose. But let's get started. Okay, with Sonlight, you are reading 4 stories within the week, typically 1 story each day. And the emphasis is on folk tales, often folk tales from different cultures. Later on in the program, you start reading books with short chapters. So this is the book being featured in this week's Stories from Around the World. And you're having, so there's a hefty amount of words. It's not just like a couple words on a page, but you're having short stories. And these are supposed to be from different cultures or different countries, kind of classic tales, Thor's hammer, and so on. But you have 1 each day. And the guide may have a comprehension question to ask or a little extra activity sometimes to go with those that you can choose to do or not. The difference with Gentle and Classical Primer is that you have 1 core story that you're focusing on for the whole week. And you can read that, you can reread it, you can practice narration skills with your child using storyboard pieces, or even without using storyboard pieces, you can reenact the tale. But the focus is on getting to know this one tale really well. So the quantity of stories will be quite a bit different from this one to this one, where you're focusing on this one story and getting to know it really well. I do really like the approach of getting to know one story really well. But one of the reasons we did end up adding in Sonlight was, in addition to the fact that my mom already owned it, so I could have the books for free for the most part, we did just kind of feel like we did want to read a little bit more. Yes, it's great to get to know stories really well, but also sometimes you're like, okay, I want to read more. So, like not every story that you read is some story that you need to know super, super deeply. You can have a little bit of both. And I do find, I find something good about both of those approaches. So that's the main approach to how they tackle literature. Now, Bible looks a little bit different in each program as well. In Sonlight, you are typically reading 3 Bible stories a week, and then you have a short Bible verse to memorize and a little bit, some kind of character word here. It's thankfulness. I show gratitude with words and actions. And you can have your children memorize that phrase, that definition of thankfulness. So again, you're having a couple Bible stories in a week and a little bit of memory work. The memory verse does change every single week. Now, as for what it looks like in Gentle and Classical Primer, for Bible, you are focusing on 1 Bible story a week. Here it's the coming of the King, basically Jesus' birth. You have that 1 story for the week, so you can spend a couple days talking about the story, reviewing it. You also have 1 lesson from the book Theology by Marty Makowski. I'm not sure how to say his name. I should probably look it up. But here you might have 1 lesson. A lot of times you actually spend a couple weeks on the same lesson from Theology because it's tying into the catechism question and answer, which your children are doing memory work with, reciting based on the memory card. each day. So these two, you're spending a couple weeks on those. It's not that you're getting a new catechism question every single week. Also, for the scripture memory verse, you're spending several weeks on the same memory verse. This one, you spend 4 weeks on this memory verse. I do find with the age of my son and just the kind of kid he is, we have an easier time actually learning and remembering the scripture that we spend 4 weeks learning, the memory verse that we spend 4 weeks learning, versus the memory verses that are introduced for 1 week before moving on. I also think that having it on a card really helps us. We have really enjoyed the Gentle and Classical memory cards, and I will show them to you, but those have been a really effective tool for doing some memory work for us. So for example, these are some of the memory cards that go with this week. We have our Bible verse, we have our catechism question, we have our virtue song that we can sing as well as discuss and talk about. What does it mean to say, I do what I said? What does that mean in reality? So we use our memory cards throughout the week. Next, I want to address how math and phonics are taught in these programs. You can see in the Sonlight guide, they do incorporate phonics instruction as well as some math instruction. In this level, they're really trying to make sure that children have a solid idea of the letters, their sounds, and getting the idea of how to write them. We're introducing them to numbers, really counting those numbers, practicing with those numbers. So they have a couple of ideas in each week, and I'll show you the pages that go behind the schedule. They'll have ideas for using a sand tray to practice writing down the letter, and you're using a sand tray pretty much every week. They have little tracing sheets that you can do for each week. And 18. It's exposure and it's practice with the letters, but it's not doing reading instruction at this time or any of that. It's mostly letters and numbers focused. There's also some cool shapes, manipulatives for tracing shapes, getting the hang of different shapes. Now in Gentle and Classical Primer, there is a math memory statement included for each week, which goes along with a card which has some sort of visual cue for the math memory statement. So in this week, it is a shapes review, but the actual primer program is meant to go alongside the kindergarten binder. I'll give you a quick look inside the kindergarten binder. I have mine all put together in a binder with plastic sleeves so that I can erase it every time my son does it. So there's a page for each letter of the alphabet, a 2-page spread that looks like this. They have a few blends in it as well, and then they also have some math pages that you can use. And there's quite a variety. We go into ordinal positions, what different symbols mean. Some of these are meant to be aligned with topics that are introduced in Math with Confidence, Kindergarten Math with Confidence, so they can kind of give extra practice on topics being used in that. But because this is more intended at a kindergarten age range, you are encouraged that if your child's ready, get a kindergarten math program and get a kindergarten phonics program. So we do use this alongside their recommended programs, which are all about reading level 1 and kindergarten math with confidence. But we have used the binder for a long time. I feel like my son's kind of growing out of it now, but we have enjoyed it for a long time. I'm keeping it for my second son, and he does still use it about once a week, but no longer daily because he's used it so long it's gotten a little old for him. All right, so now let's look at how each curriculum tackles music and art for your young child. For Sonlight, you're going to be mainly using this book, and about once a week you will just be told to go to a certain 2-page spread and look at the art on that spread. And they have different themes. This one is themed toward counting, so you can count. And you can take this as far as you want to, as the parent, you can be pointing out different details, asking, do you think that these people would be dressing like this today? Or do you think that this was painted a long time ago? So you can be pointing out different kinds of details, asking your child to point out colors, different features like that. Talking about the names of the artist, which is the oldest painting on the page. it's all up to your imagination pretty much what you can do with it. And then as for music, they typically include some kind of children's song that they suggest you sing. And they have a CD if you buy the whole kit. I don't have the CD, but pretty much all these songs are on the internet. So I have decided to follow Jesus. That's a classic. You can sing that with your child on that day or anytime during the week. Now, the way that music and art is taught in Gentle and Classical Primer is quite a bit different, and it is more connected to Charlotte Mason ideas. So these were ideas that were pretty new to me until I started using Gentle and Classical resources. So you will be tackling 3 hymns, 3 artists, and 3 composers during the course of Gentle and Classical Primer. So the 3rd hymn that your children are learning is Holy, Holy, Holy. That's the one that we just started this term. And then I'm going to change this over here so that you can see the art and music section. Then the composer for the 3rd term is Tchaikovsky, and you alternate between a music week and then an art week, a music week and then an art week. So they do have suggested books that you use as you're learning about music. So we have the Story of the Orchestra book, where we're reading about different instruments, and we're also able to read about different composers. In addition, for learning to identify the instruments and art, they have 3-part cards that work like this, where you can do matching type of activities, different sorts of activities with these as your children are learning the names of different instruments of the orchestra. They also sometimes have suggested picture books, storybooks. This is one that I have, which was for Mozart. When we were learning about the opera, the magic flute, it really does help. For me, as someone who's not an opera person, who is not a ballet person, it really does help to have a picture book version. Then I'm like, okay, I can watch a video of the opera. I'm like, okay, I kind of get it now, but I would not get it if I were just watching the opera. I did not grow up learning a whole lot about classical music, so it was definitely helpful to have the book in this case. Then I'll just show you on alternate weeks, they're studying about an artist. And while you learn about musical instruments during your week where you're learning about a composer, during your art week, you're learning about elements of art, which that's really rather clever. For artists, they do recommend a picture book biography or 2 picture books related to the artist. So we have this one for Kandinsky. They also have full-page art prints, which I have, as well as smaller art cards, which I did not print the art cards, but I do have the full-page prints. Then in addition to that, they usually have some sort of art project that connects to the element of art that you're learning about. So in this case, you're learning about the element line in art. And so you're going to have a little art activity related to line. And those art activities are every other week. Now, in addition, both programs include some poetry. In Sonlight, it is Eric Carle's Animals, Animals, a very beloved animal poetry book for young children. In Primer, you're learning one nursery rhyme, typically a Mother Goose type of rhyme, every week, and you can repeat it, recite it again repeatedly throughout the week using your handy-dandy memory card. And so the children get pretty familiar with this one rhyme by the end of the week. They also include a Robert Louis Stevenson poem as well, and these are a bit longer. With the age of my children, I have not been doing any recitation or reading of these with them, but they do recommend some versions of these poems that have been set to music by Ted Jacobs, and I do add those to our morning time playlist, the playlist on Spotify that I use when my children are just playing or as we're going about the work of the day. So I've actually learned quite a few of them just by listening to them, but these are a little longer and more advanced for the age of my kids, so we haven't focused on that as much. Now, as far as science goes, Sonlight does itself include science, and for the first long part of the program, you are going through the Bernstein Bears Big Book of Science and Nature, which this book is an excellent, excellent book. There is almost everything a tiny child needs to know about nature science is pretty much included in this book. But they also have a variety of other books that come in later in the program. Forces, from the Wells of Knowledge Science series, a blue whale. Is a blue whale the biggest thing there is? Why do elephants need the sun? We have some Magic School Bus. We have some Gail Gibbons, a favorite for picture books that are nonfiction. How to dig a hole to the other side of the world. That's not even all of the science books. So you're reading some science every day. Gentle and Classical Primer does not itself include science, but Gentle and Classical offers its 2 nature volumes. There's a volume 1 and a volume 2. I have completely used volume 1 and we are currently using volume 2. They're really well done, really enjoyable. They also feature memory cards. This is the one for our upcoming week in our ocean science, ocean nature study. This is the one for a week that we've already done. I laminated mine double-sided to save paper and laminating sleeves. So I have a whole video about Gentle and Classical Nature. I will link down below if you want to see how Gentle and Classical does science. Now, there are a few things that don't exactly align from one side, from one curriculum to the other. Sonlight does a little bit more with what I would consider to be social studies, using mainly the Things People Do book. Then Gentle and Classical has manners and hygiene statement, which go along with the book Everyday Graces, which I would describe as, do you know the Book of Virtues? It's like the Book of Virtues, but it's for manners. So it kind of has different short stories, poems, everything related to different types of manners and ideas for human interaction. So those are some things that are just a little bit different. I hope that this video was helpful for giving you an idea of what it looks like. One unit is intended to cover 1 week in a school year. There are 36 units in this program. Sonlight also has 36 weeks. They are scheduled out day by day, as you can see with what pages to read. Of course, you have flexibility as the homeschooling parent to lump a few days together or whatever works best for you. One thing I should also mention is that Sonlight also includes the Developing the Early Learner books, which look something like this. And these are not workbooks that focus on numbers and letters per se, but they are workbooks that focus on listening skills, logic-based skills, motor, visual, auditory, and thinking skills. So this is a really nice series. It's one that I would recommend whether you're doing Sonlight or not. They're really neat, easy, fun. My son looks forward to them. So I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions about these 2 literature-based, Bible-rich early learning programs, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I'll be seeing you next time. Bye!